Well, thank you, friend. Shabbat Shalom. Greetings to you all. It has been a hell of a couple of weeks. We're in a new month, the month of Elul, a month with no extra holy days, just the Sabbath. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. It's the month leading up to the high holy days. The high holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The countdown to judgment has begun. I think about that Fantastic Who song, I Can See for Miles. I know you've deceived me, now here's a surprise. I know that you have, 'cause there's magic in my eyes. I can see for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No one can see that far. No one has that magic in their eyes. No one can judge that much or that properly. We will be hearing all about judgment soon enough. So in the meantime, ponder this insight. If you're interested in transformation, no element is more important than developing a love of truth. The truth encompasses both our fearful reactions and the greater resources of our soul. Keep seeking the truth. The Torah is a search for truth. Interestingly enough, I've had several inquiries lately about congregations. I've been asked on several occasions to take over the role of spiritual director of different synagogues going through periods of transition, and why I don't have my own particular congregation. Well, I appreciate the inquiries, but I prefer to be free to help them with the things they have not been able to do and help them with their process of finding the right candidates. Right now, my congregation is wherever I'm needed. My primary focus as a rabbi has been to provide assistance and service for the unaffiliated and the interfaith communities, to the disenfranchised who've been pushed away by the spiritual community of man that follows specific rules and dogmas. I'm on call to provide high holy day services for several synagogues that do not have a resident rabbi. And while I have the utmost respect for the various denominations, I keep explaining to those who ask that I respect them all too much to contravene their rules and regulations. And I would not be able to provide the services I otherwise am called on to provide. Right now, statistics show over 50% of Jews marry outside the faith. They have great difficulty finding clergy to honor their choice or their desire to maintain and uphold their spiritual roots in their lives. So often, many of the couples I married come back to me to begin the process of reintegrating tradition and spirit in their lives, and I am so very appreciative of it. Rather than push them away, I service their needs. To take a pulpit position would preclude my doing this because of the rules of affiliation. Instead, I am often called in to provide life cycle events for affiliated members of congregations whose rabbis refuse to do so. And therefore, I get to uphold my promise to teach, to encourage, and to service. So thank you all for your wonderful inquiries. My primary function in this weekly presentation is to help you approach Torah in new and different and exciting ways. It's not an old book to be told the same way for eternity. It is an ever-evolving organic system of teaching, which we are to reinterpret in every generation, in every and any time. It is a system built on the intent that you bring, and not on the ability to drone on or memorize or blindly follow what was done before, simply because. I do believe in the oneness of man, all man and spirit. And by man, I of course mean humanity. We are all one. We come from one source, we are all connected, and I cannot and will not distinguish between the spiritual energy that flows through everyone. I love meeting the members of different communities who call on me and inevitably approach those members to work to integrate more brotherhood and acceptance in their future approach. And I love continuing hearing from the many of you that I've met in my travels. I do not distinguish. I do not demand you do one thing and not another. I do not judge. I accept that everyone who comes with pure intentions deserves the same rights, respects, honors. Don't want to judge nobody. Don't want to be judged. Friends, this is Shoftim, the judges. And friends, the laws that are written are not in ink on paper, but in spirit in your heart. I teach a meditation class, and I did a fantastic guided meditation with someone, and it was about finding that place, that safe haven where you can go, where you can create and heal and be at peace and at one, where the day-to-day trials and tribulations of life can be parked, resolved, filed. And while it can be anywhere, somewhere real, somewhere imagined, somewhere you've been or never been, somewhere you want to go, always changeable, always yours. Someone turned to me and told me the place they went was in their heart. What a place where everything they would do, see, resolve, understand stems from love. Wow, how awesome. Let us all strive to go into our hearts. Friends, how do we learn to judge ourselves? We have 2 holy days coming up, and now one of them has taken on the role of being the holiest day of the year. And they are both built around judging, not others, but ourselves. Well, we're in a new and different generation, so let's borrow from some of the things taught to this new generation. Learning does not just trickle down from old to new. You have to realize it can just as easily flow from new to old. And new and different questions are being asked by our younger generation, by you. And accordingly, self-management and examination styles are changing, and systems are dominating, so let us borrow from the new. Let's begin to move from linearity to complexity. Our view of life tends to be linear. We assume that similar inputs will result in similar outputs. While in many situations this holds true, how we lead ourselves now requires a much more nuanced view of the world, because it involves people. What motivates them? What are their interests? How engaged they become. This is a social media world now. Mechanical systems may be linear, but as soon as that human element becomes involved, the system becomes complex and adaptive. It's dynamic. Similar inputs may bring about wildly divergent outputs. We're in a far more engaging and people-oriented world today. New priorities exist, and you come to understand that relationships are paramount rather than the components themselves. Discerning these dynamics is essential to achieving your desired outcome, which means you think about connectivity and the extent of those connections. You accept that these relationships contain some factors you control and some that you don't. You are part of the system, but likely you are not its gravitational center anymore. When things go well, or you hit a bump in the road, you got to ask yourself, which direct and which indirect relationships were at play? Where did your attention to positive connectivity pay off? And where might you have done better? You have to change your view. See focus as a verb and not as a noun. There's always temptation to set static goals. But once you accept that you're operating in a dynamic and adaptive environment, you begin to realize such goals have limitations. You have to be flexible. You have to be able to recalibrate to ensure that you've established the right goals and that they include purpose, which is understanding the problem you need to solve, and values, which is the bedrock principles that guide your activities. What you read in the Torah is all about this kind of focus. Clarity is a constant challenge. Influences come and go. Our knowledge as evolved, technology disrupts. You must balance your short and long-term interests as well. Each of these can create distortions and distractions. We must learn to gain clarity on purpose and values without having to control every action and decision. As you contemplate the outcomes you achieve, for better or for worse, ask yourself about clarity. Ask others and accept their honest feedback. Make the shift from they to you. For too long, individuals have looked to their institutions to tell them how to develop. And this competency model does not work anymore. Problems develop when too much is built on current realities rather than future needs. What do you need? We live in a political world love don't have any place. We're living in times where men commit crimes and crime don't have any face. This is a parsha about judging, something we have gotten very good at. And so in Deuteronomy 16:18, we are told there must be judgment without problems. We have to realize that there has to be justice. They're not always the same thing. You shall not bend judgment. You shall not recognize a face. You shall not take a bribe, because bribery will blind the eyes of the wise and undermine the words of the virtuous. Today we must wonder if this were written in invisible ink. The concept of having judgment with justice seems so foreign to us now. But you're studying a book that's based on evolvement, but which many believe has been given static rules to follow, which are followed, even though we're given great clues all along, but choose not to see them. And we're even given a great clue here. He shall write for himself a copy of this teaching in a book before the Levitical priest. This sentence alone tells us really incredible things. It tells us that Moses, as fortune teller, has the ability to predict an era of kingship, and that this should take place in front of a Levitical priest. Very interesting term. This was obviously added after the period of Moses. We can see this, but we choose to ignore this. The idea of justice and judges was essential, but it's been diminished over time. There was a sense of community at one point, which is why we are told the hand of the witnesses shall be against him first. The frequently made observation concerning this stipulation, that it will compel the witnesses to be very cautious about their testimony, seems rather contrite. Why, after all, would this opportunity to be first among the executioner not encourage a zealot or a person with a private grudge to offer hasty or even false testimony against the accused idolater? Because the law in general reflects the anti-pagan animus of Deuteronomy, in an effort to forge a seamless anti-idolatrous Israelite front in which a kind of popular justice is carried out by the whole community. See, capital punishment is the act of a community. In ancient Israel, and even more so in democracy, you see, in biblical law, the community must know that if they are going to have capital punishment, they must understand this means that the community as a whole is taking lives. Now, perhaps it is this fact that in ancient Israel, all the people had to carry out the execution was one of the forces that led Israel to make capital punishment almost impossible in rabbinic law. Now, we also see a very interesting ancient connectivity take place. A king whom the Lord your God chooses, and thus by using the same phrase for both temple and king, the Deuteronomist affects an alignment between the election of a central sanctuary and the election of the monarch, in keeping with the premise that this is all a Mosaic prediction. And the fact that the king's political capital and the sanctuary's location are one and the same is not spelled out, although for the 7th century BCE audience who this book was discovered for, they would of course register the connection. Friends, in this section of judgment, there is this fantastic exhortation that just sits there in the middle of nothing. Let your heart be not faint. Do not fear and do not quake and do not dread. For the Lord your God goes before you to do battle with your enemies to save you. We are reminded on an ongoing basis, fear is the great enemy. Fear not in any battle you have. Faith will carry you through. I think today less believe this than in the past. The armies of doubt and fear seem to grow all the time, and it is hard to have faith. In ancient times, those who let fear rule them were simply dismissed from military service because that fear could spread and become an insidious disease among the troops. Today, we have let fear simply become our way of living. How do you work to overcome it? What do you need in order to hold on to your own individual, personal faith? This is the time to ask these questions. This is the month to prepare for personal judgment. Whatever you do, please continue to notice and challenge the differences. Notice how in Deuteronomy 16:22 Moses says, "You shall not set up a pillar." This is one of my favorites, friends. Moses moves from making them to saying that God hates them, all within the 40 years in the wilderness. Hey, everyone we've read about has set up pillars. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, even Moses did and Joshua will. With all these differences, how do you know which you're supposed to be following? What guides your life? Look for the clues. Here we are told that in disputes, go to the Levite priests. Hey, once all Levites were priests, then over time, only the descendants of Aaron had that privilege. Notice also that you begin to see the underlying key differences that formed in the various sects of Judaism. The Torah tells us itself that authorities in each age shall determine what to do. This has always been done in Judaism. The most obvious distinction among the movements has been their different views of how the laws change. The primary consideration when authorities, including scholars and rabbis, determine that a law is changed is that they do so with wisdom and reverence and not with arrogance. Friends, I am following the precept of doing this by the things I do, and I encourage you all to do so too. Examine your guidelines. Be prepared to make change. Too often people miss the obvious and turn instead to the comfortable. We do this in so many of the means by which we observe. We focus on things which did not take place. Don't forget, most of the Torah looks towards the well-being of the land from outside of it. Only about 29 of the Torah's 187 chapters take place in the Promised Land. Moses never sets foot in it, and the phrase land of Israel never occurs in the Torah. And yet the Torah's entire story is focused on and directed towards the land of Israel constantly. It is the promise of the covenant with Abraham. For the last 2 millennia, most Jews have lived outside the Promised Land. They have lived all over the world and have been good citizens wherever they settled, while having affection for the land of Israel, a consciousness of their origin there, and a desire to contribute to it, to travel to it, to seek its well-being. It has been inculcated as a part of our genetic makeup, but we must learn to be progressive in how to apply these rules, these morals, these ethics, these lessons. Friends, the world is sacred. So is everything in it. Express your gratitude, light a candle, make a wish. Celebrate your life and the lives of those you love. Share your feelings with them. Live free, be free, and honor your freedom. Be well, be happy, be blessed. Share and honor the light and all who live in the light, and continue to shine. Continue to send everyone you know goodwill and love. Pray for peace and freedom for everyone, an end to terror and hatred. Remember, friends, we are a community. We learn together. We celebrate each other. We love each other. We share this ride together, men and women equally. I hear the dogs. Let us send out love, not fear. Fall in love, friends. It is the great gamble worth taking. Ask questions. Do not take because as an answer. See what lies in front of you. Break free of the dogma. Change your way of thinking. The glamour and the bright lights and the politics of sin. The ghetto that you built for me is the one you're living in. The race of the engine that overrules your heart. Oh, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. Pretending that you're so smart. Thank you all. Love you. See you all next time. And I do love seeing you again. And remember, your wishes do come true. Bless you all. Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Take care. Bye.